Engine struggles occasionally. Citroen C3 1.6 e-HDi collection. Engine code 9806 1560cc 4-sill. 2012 model. Diesel. The engine of this car occasionally stutters, where a plume of smoke is sometimes visible and the engine management light comes on, and when reading the system, an error message appears that indicates a problem with oil pressure and possibly a clogged or defective oil pressure filter or a related component, which means that the engine sometimes produces less power and can go into a kind of emergency mode to protect itself, and can then function reasonably normally again for a period until the cause occurs again. This car with a 1600 diesel engine with the internal code 9H06 and a capacity of approximately 1.6 liters belongs to the well-known e-HDi diesel engines, and that engine family has been in production from approximately the beginning of 2009 to approximately the end of 2016 in different variants and power classes with several models within the brand, and in collaboration with other brands with similar technology, where many experiences and known problems can be found on the internet. Known problems with these engines may include contamination in the intake tract due to soot and oil deposits, blockage or defects in the particulate filter, problems with the exhaust gas recirculation system such as stuck valve blockage or leakage, complaints around injectors such as contamination or leaking injectors, problems with the oil lubrication system due to changing too little or too late or the use of the wrong oil, and in some cases problems with the turbocharger and the oil supply to the turbo. Your description shows that the error code indicates a problem with oil pressure and filter, and that provides a clear direction for diagnosis and repair because a clogged oil filter, too low oil pressure, or a problem with the oil pressure sensor can cause the engine management to intervene, and that can manifest itself in stuttering, loss of power, and fault message, sometimes accompanied by smoke due to incomplete combustion, due to emergency running, or due to temporary disruption of injection and turbo pressure. This engine also has small oil passageways and filters for the turbocharger, among other things, and if contamination occurs there due to outdated oil or insufficient maintenance, the oil pressure can cause local or general problems. The first step in a good diagnosis and repair plan is always a thorough check of the engine and the error codes by an experienced mechanic with a professional diagnostic computer that can communicate specifically for the brand and this engine family, and can read live data and not just general OBD codes. Because in addition to the stored error codes, current oil pressure, turbo pressure, fuel pressure, and the operation of the injectors and the particulate filter and related systems can also be examined. This includes a visual inspection in the engine compartment for leaks, loose plugs, damaged cables, oil level and oil quality, air filter and intake pipes, and soot marks on the exhaust and turbo. In the diagnosis process, it is wise to first start with a complete service specifically aimed at the lubrication system, whereby engine oil and oil filter are replaced with the correct specification oil according to the regulations for this e-HDi engine, because many problems are caused or worsened by old or incorrect oil and a clogged oil filter. And after this change, the mechanic must check whether the engine management still returns an error code regarding oil pressure or oil pressure filter. It may also be necessary to measure the oil pressure mechanically with a special gauge at the location of the oil pressure sensor to determine whether the actual oil pressure is normal or whether there is an internal problem such as a worn oil pump or heavily contaminated oil passageways. The diagnostic equipment associated with this process consists of a professional diagnostic tester for the brand, a digital multimeter for checking sensors and wiring, a mechanical oil pressure gauge, and standard garage tools such as socket sets, wrenches, torque wrenches, a collection container for oil, and tools for replacing the oil filter, air filter, and possibly fuel filter. If the error code returns after changing the oil and oil filter and deleting the error codes, it must be investigated whether the oil pressure sensor is defective or whether the control and wiring are damaged, and in that case the sensor can be measured and replaced if necessary. Well-known problems with this engine family that are often mentioned on the internet include, in addition to oil pressure complaints, clogging of the particulate filter, lack of regeneration due to many short journeys, which causes the engine to smoke more and can go into limp mode, problems with the exhaust gas recirculation system, which causes the engine to run irregularly or stutter, and sometimes turbocharger problems due to poor lubrication and pollution, which can manifest as a loss of power. Whistling turbo or smoke. Complaints also occur regarding the high-pressure fuel pump and injectors at higher mileage, where starting problems and irregular running may occur. With this engine type, which was used from approximately the beginning of 2009 in various models and equipment levels until approximately the end of 2016, regular maintenance is of great importance, and a distinction is usually made between a minor maintenance service and a major maintenance service. A minor service generally includes replacing engine oil and oil filter, checking fluids such as coolant, brake fluid, power steering fluid, windshield washer fluid and checking lights, tire tread depth, tire pressure, brakes, and a general safety check. In addition to the work of a minor service, a major service often also includes replacing the air filter, fuel filter, cabin filter, and depending on age and mileage, possibly the timing belt and water pump, changing brake fluid and thoroughly checking the chassis, suspension, and exhaust. The maintenance costs in euros for a minor service on this car are often around 300 to 500 euros, depending on workshop hourly rates and parts used, while a major service can vary from about 500 to well over 1,000 euros, especially when the timing belt with water pump is replaced, and when additional parts such as brake discs, brake pads, or worn suspension parts have to be included. Labor rates depend greatly on the workshop and region, but are often around 60 to 100 euros per hour, and parts such as oil filters and small parts form a separate part of the invoice. For specific repairs, such as replacing the oil pressure sensor, several hours of labor must be taken into account, and the price of the sensor itself is usually in the order of several tens to more than 100 euros depending on brand and quality. For larger repairs such as replacing a turbocharger or a particulate filter, the costs can amount to many hundreds or even more than 1,000 euros in parts, plus several hours of labor. For preventive maintenance and the prevention of future problems, it is advisable to change the oil as prescribed and preferably slightly more often than the maximum permitted interval, especially if the car drives a lot of short journeys. When purchasing a used car of this type, and with this engine, it is wise to have an extensive inspection carried out by an independent mechanic who has experience with this engine type, and who can look at the condition of the engine, particulate filter, turbo, timing belt, brakes, suspension, and electronic systems. The maintenance history is examined to determine whether the oil has been replaced on time, whether the timing belt has been replaced on time, whether there is no active engine fault light, and whether there are no stuttering, smoke, or irregularities during the test drive. It is also wise to read the car for error codes before you buy, and to have the measurements of the particulate filter load, turbo pressure, and fuel corrections of the injectors checked. Car parts such as starter motor, alternator, and shock absorbers have a varying lifespan depending on use and maintenance. A starter motor can often last between 100 and 300,000 kilometers under normal use, but intensive use, short journeys, and frequent starting can shorten that lifespan. An alternator often lasts for many years under normal load and can continue to function for around that order of kilometers, but defects in the voltage regulator or bearings can occur earlier. Shock absorbers often have a lifespan of roughly 80,000 to 150,000 kilometers, but bad roads, many bumps, and driving with heavy loads can cause these parts to wear out faster. Preventive replacement of parts is intended to prevent downtime and prevent serious damage. The timing belt for this engine family usually has a replacement interval that is expressed in time and kilometers. For example, every 5 or 6 years or around 100,000 to 150,000 kilometers, depending on the exact engine variant and the manufacturer's advice. It is advisable to always replace the timing belt together with the water pump and rollers because these components wear out together. The costs for this are often between 700 and 1,500 euros, including parts and labor, depending on the workshop and parts used. To prevent future problems, it is also wise to regularly replace the fuel filter to prevent contamination in the fuel system, to replace the air filter cleanly and on time so that the engine receives sufficient clean air and does not produce an unnecessary amount of soot, and to give the particulate filter the opportunity to regenerate itself by occasionally driving longer journeys at operating temperature so that the exhaust gas temperatures become high enough for good regeneration. It is also important to stop driving at the first signs of stuttering, smoke, or loss of power, but to have the car checked so that larger damage such as a defective turbo or serious particulate filter blockage can be prevented as much as possible. As a summary diagnosis and repair plan for your complaint about stuttering smoke and error code for oil pressure filter, the order could be approximately as follows. First, complete professional diagnosis with brand-specific diagnostic tester, including reading error codes and viewing live data. Then checking the oil level and oil quality, and replacing the oil and oil filter with the correct specification. Then mechanically checking the oil pressure with an oil pressure meter, if error codes remain. Then checking the oil pressure sensor, and wiring and replacing the sensor if necessary. Then checking the particulate filter, exhaust gas recirculation system, and turbo. Blockage, leakage, or defects when the oil pressure and sensor are okay, and the problem may have its cause elsewhere. And finally, a test drive with diagnostic equipment connected to check whether the stuttering and the error code disappear. This structured approach and good maintenance can identify and repair many problems and prevent much damage and high costs in the future.